to the brink of destruction in ways that the Greeks have explained as well as anyone. And what Jill was saying too about these basic green values and programs, the Green New Deal, these are all things that socialists feel very comfortable and at home with when we hear these type of points made. Socialists and Greens also both understand how communities of color and working class people are the first victims of global warming, toxic waste dumping, and environmental racism in general. Globally, coastal areas and their poor populations likewise are in the front lines of environmental degradation. The suspension of local environmental regulations is a condition for the placement of production facilities and starvation wage jobs in the countries of the global south by corporations like Nike, aggravates environmental damage in those countries and the global ecosystem as a whole. Consider the failure of all of the G8 countries to meet even the inadequate levels of carbon and CO2 emissions that they have agreed to in the Paris Accords and other international agreements. All of this brutally underscores not only the role of industrial capitalism in creating the environmental crisis, but its inability to solve it. All those countries in the G8, all these countries that sign agreements and refuse to do anything about them, are capitalist countries run by capitalist parties. All this, of course, flows from the irrational rationality of capitalism, particularly its current, particularly lethal form of neoliberal capitalism. Socialists like to cite turn-of-the-century German revolutionary socialist Rosa Luxemburg, who saw humanity's future as socialism or barbarism. We socialists today, and we know Greens agree with us, understand that, well, many of us understand that socialism, or the destruction of a planet, is the future of humanity and the planet. In the socialist movement, there's a lot of talk nowadays, has been for a few years, of eco-socialism, describing the tight compatibility between socialism and defense of the environment. Solidarity is a violent eco-socialist working. These are assumed to be part of socialism. So what about some of the political basis, the actual activity that underscores the Red-Green alliances? Well, for socialists, the central feature and challenge of U.S. Politics is the question of independent working class action. And what we mean by this is political action independent of two parties of U.S. capitalism, the Republicans and the Democrats. The U.S., as many of us know, perhaps you don't know, is one of the few countries without an organized labor party or some political party attached institutionally and programmatically to the organized labor movement. And there are many activists, we know them all, who consider themselves socialists, yet vote and support the politics of lesser evil, supporting the politics of lesser evilism, supporting Democrats over big bad Republicans. And I will make the case against that because Jill Stein made the greatest case about the current neoliberal course of the Democratic Party, and they work hand in hand with the Republicans in many ways. And that what we saw a few weeks ago was anything but a progressive blue wave. It was a capitalist blue wave. It was just completely within the confines of the system. Throw the bad guys out is really what it is, and that's of course how the system works. The two-party system here. So what's really, really important for the Red-Green Alliance on the ground is that the Greens understand this. Both the Greens and revolutionary socialists today support independent political action. And I think that this is when Jill talked about people, planet, and peace being defended, and then how they can't be defended by the Democratic Party. We couldn't agree more. So there's really, I want to kind of finish with just maybe exploring this alliance and the common action we have on two levels, one in the electoral and the other in kind of social movement activity. Well, we talked a lot about in this conference today about experience in the electoral arena, and the Greens over the years have now acquired considerable experiences and gotten quite good with it. And there's ballot status that's held in certain areas, and this is something that really contributes to the alliance. This is something the Greens can bring to the table with socialists. particularly the DSA, which is an organization not ready to run candidates yet per se, but has been endorsing all sorts of candidates in kind of a confused way. So I think there's a real basis for the Greens to teach something a little bit to DSA and other socialists about the electoral arena. And there's a lot of links between socialism and Greens in the electoral arena. One of the best ones is Howie Hawkins, who's running, I think, about 20 different electoral campaigns over the year, and is able to bring about, with the successful scores that he has had, is able to get Green Party status in Massachusetts and New York, I think, as well. Locally, the Angela Walker campaign that we had 4 years ago showed the tremendous potential of such a campaign. Angela Walker ran against a conservative, black, Democrat, lock 'em up, racist politician, as you know, David Clark. And it was very cynical to have a conservative like this be run as a Democrat. So we had bipartisan support. And Angela Walker we had almost nothing as far as a budget. But yet Angela Walker was able to receive 28.8% of the vote, 67,000 votes against an established politician with plenty of funding. So I think that shows a little bit of the great potential available at the local level. Some of you know that Marshall Rummel, also a Solidarity member, is one of the 4 city council people on the city council in Madison. So there's another example of this type of collaboration. Underground activism. I think that one of the great strengths of the Greens is not only its taste for electoral activity, but for social movement activism. And there's many areas where there's been collaboration. And I just want to mention one of the most recent ones was the Green participation, local Greens participation in local fight for 15-hour minimum wage. And to see on YouTube George Martin being arrested, standing up for the rights of poor working people of color, was a great inspiration to all of us, and definitely something that socialists get excited about. So it's these type of things, these type of struggles, which are perfect examples of how the programs, politics, and activist instincts of Greens and socialists are closely aligned, and why tighter connections are logical and practical, and at a time of wholesale attacks against working people, oppressed leaders, and the environment, very, very vital.
Thanks, Keith. So, as Bill said, my background is very much with the Green Party, but I've had the pleasure to work with a lot of socialists, including Howie Hawkins. I think I'm going to be the third person to quote Howie Hawkins today. Maybe not the last. So, I wanted to start by asking a question that is asked a lot, particularly by socialists, when we approach them about working together. Is the Green Party socialist? So the National Party platform calls for an alternative economic system based on ecology and decentralization of power, which it identifies as ecological socialism. And I considered whether I should read the entire platform plank, but I decided to go ahead and do it because this is the most talked about plank in the Green Party platform that I've seen in my time on the platform committee. The Green Party seeks to build an alternative economic system based on ecology and decentralization of power, an alternative that rejects both the capitalist system that maintains private ownership over almost all production, as well as the state socialist system that assumes control over industries without democratic local decision-making. We believe the old models of capitalism, private ownership of production, and state socialism, state ownership of production, are not ecologically sound, socially just, or democratic, and that both contain built-in structures that advance injustices. Instead, we will build an economy based on large-scale green public works, municipalization, and workplace and community democracy. Some call this the centralized system ecological socialism, communalism, or the cooperative commonwealth. But whatever the terminology, we believe it will help end labor exploitation, environmental exploitation, and racial, gender, and wealth inequality, and bring about economic and social justice due to the positive effects of democratic decision-making. Production is best for people and planet when democratically owned and operated by those who do the work and those most affected by production decisions. This model of worker and community empowerment will ensure that decisions that greatly affect our lives are made in the interests of our communities, not at the whim of centralized power structures of state administrators or of capitalist CEOs and distant boards of directors. Small, democratically run enterprises, when embedded in and accountable to our communities, will make more ecologically sound decisions in material sourcing, waste disposal, recycling, reuse, and more. Democratic, diverse ownership of production would decentralize power in the workplace, which would in turn decentralize economic power more broadly. So, the platform implicitly acknowledges with that phrase, whatever the terminology, that not all Greens are willing to explicitly identify as socialists. And whether that's due to the historical repression of socialism in the US, or disagreements with historical or current power structures identified as socialist. But that said, more and more Greens are openly identifying as socialists and eco-socialists. And as we know, words like socialism and capitalism, which describe incredibly complex systems, are loaded terms that can mean different things to different people. But to paraphrase Howie Hawkins, who mentioned as a founding member of the Green Party and a longtime socialist, the word socialism used to basically be a conversation ender, but now it's a conversation starter. And I think it's safe to say that Greens recognize the unsustainability and injustice of the current capitalist system. Growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. And the prioritization of profit over people, planet, and peace by the capitalist economy and the political establishment is leading towards social and ecological collapse. So we see that Greens and socialists have often worked side by side in the same social movements, and we tend to share core values and similar analysis. Like Greens, socialists are often big picture systemic thinkers, and as such, they're not easily fooled by the empty promises of the corporate two-party system. And this is my analysis, one party serves the function of giving capitalists everything they want to maximize short-term profits, and the other party serves as Wall Street's backup team. They take power when the nakedly greedy capitalists are tossed out, and they give people just enough crumbs from the table to keep people from knocking over the table. And actually, historian Carol Quigley summed up how the system works. And I quote, "The argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps at the right and the other at the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical, so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy." So, several organizations on the left, many of them have been mentioned, DSA, Solidarity, some of them are less interested in the two-party system, but they're basically all debating how to engage with electoral politics, and specifically if they should attempt to work inside or outside the Democratic Party. And as Howie Hawkins says, to avoid the political cul-de-sac, which is another word for dead end, of choosing between a greater and lesser evil, the left must commit itself to building an independent, membership-based working-class party. Such a third-party insurgency in the United States must be built from the bottom up in two complementary ways. First, it must organize a working-class majority at the bottom of the social structure into a political party that speaks and acts independently for itself. Second, it must mobilize that base to participate in social movement and electoral activities to win and consolidate power and reforms, first in cities, then states, and finally in the nation. As Hawkins points out, as we've seen repeatedly, all so-called inside-outside approaches to the Democratic Party lead eventually to the inside. Yet this has never resulted in real power for the left, only co-optation. A two-party system that moves continually to the right, chasing corporate money, that keeps voters in line through lesser evilism will always disempower the left. And by that I mean working class people, advocates for peace and the environment, and all those without power and privilege. So what I say is disempowerment of the progressive left is not a bug in the two-party system, it's a feature. And actually, if you look at the history, that's the way the system was designed, to empower the elite and keep the people at bay. Therefore, Greens and Socialists both find ourselves kept out of power by a system of barriers that reinforce each other, an interlocking system of control of the economy, politics, and information by the rich. But there are cracks in the system due to its many failures and contradictions. So even though the system may seem all powerful or all pervasive, the so-called masters of humanity are much more afraid than we often think of the potential for fast-moving change that could throw off their control. So Greens and Socialists have many opportunities to work together, both on issue and electoral campaigns. And Socialists can shape the direction of the Green Party by participating in the party, working on the platform, and helping to craft a strategy for realizing our shared goals. And Howie Hawkins has articulated a strategy based on history as well as current conditions to build the Green Party into a mass membership organization, which is entitled The Case for an Independent Left Party from the Bottom Up. And it's a long read, but it's worth every minute or every hour that you put into it. Because he really has thought it through and he lays it all out. And I would just say that an important part of that is, exactly as Jill said, when you look at breaking out who's voting and who's not voting, you see the Democrats and Republicans representing maybe 25 to 30% of voters each, and those numbers fluctuate a little bit. The largest block of voters is independents, who don't identify with either of the establishment parties. And the largest block of all is those eligible voters who are not voting. And those people are very much the disempowered, who have been alienated from politics by the two parties of war on Wall Street. So we see a lot of lower income people, black and brown people, just everyone who has been disempowered by the system. And so instead of just going for the people who are already voting, a big part of what we have to do is empower and organize the people who could vote. So that said, Greens also need to shed our reputation of focusing solely on electoral politics, which we can do by showing up for issue campaigns and events with our socialist comrades. And both Greens and Socialists should be bolder in taking the lead on organizing demonstrations, teach-ins, and other events independently of the Democratic Party and its many friends organizations, which at the end of the day function to herd people back into the big business tent. Not to empower them, but to co-opt them and limit their effectiveness. So Greens and Socialists should aim not just to mobilize people to vote for leaders, but to organize them to advocate for their own interests. And that includes through the political process, but it's not limited to it. I'm going to end there, but once again, I'm just going to encourage people to read The Case for an Independent Left Party from the Bottom Up by Howie Hawkins, because I think it absolutely is the blueprint for where we need to go. And I'll just put in one more plug that if you haven't yet become a member, or if you're thinking of becoming a sustaining member, please sign up today, because having a dues-paying membership that's committed to building the party is very much essential and critical to building the kind of world that we want to see. Thank you.
Well, I'm the other Keith. Note to self, Beth Jill Stein, Keith Mann, and Dave Schwartz. What's much left to say. Well, as Bill mentioned, I, a little over 2 years ago, I didn't found the DSA, but I was there at the very first, one of the very first meetings for the Milwaukee DSA. So I guess I'm a part founder. I will say, I'm not here speaking on behalf of the DSA. That's probably a good disclaimer to make. And to Bill's question, I probably consider myself. So that's how that works. Yeah, so I began with the DSA and certainly found political comrades there, still very active with the DSA. But as I have experienced it for the last 2 years, one of the things you realize very quickly is DSA is not a political organization in the sense of it has no political party, it has no political arm, so to speak. We don't run candidates, but the DSA does on occasion endorse candidates, and probably one that you're familiar with is the New York DSA candidate that was endorsed was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was recently elected. There was a lot of excitement about that. But Democratic Socialists of America, we lack a political party. We lack a political arm. In endorsing, more often than not, the DSA ends up endorsing a progressive Democrat, however you would like to define that. And I find that to be problematic. And I let people know that I find that to be problematic. And the reason why I find that to be problematic is the history of the Democratic Party with regard to left socialists is one of co-option, suppression, and obstruction. I won't go into great detail about that, but everyone knows that that is the case in this room. So, what to do? I mean, if I have a choice between a corporate Democrat and one that claims that he or she is a progressive Democrat, and if they're endorsed by DSA, I suppose that I would vote for that person. But here's the problem, and we all know the problem. If the person, even endorsed by DSA or whoever, a progressive Democrat, happens to get through the primary process, which is tough in the first place, and happens to find themselves elected, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Party will discourage, they will obstruct, they will attempt to co-opt them once they do get elected, and or refuse them any influence once they get to office. And so for all those reasons, I find it very problematic to work as the inside-outside method of working within the Democratic Party. I find it very problematic. So as I personally reflected on that, working with the DSA, I began earlier this year looking around for a party to become a part of. And I eventually ended up on that website that they read from, and I'm reading it, I'm going, yeah, I'm all excited about it. And oddly enough, I read it again, part of it last night again, and I read the exact thing that they read for us. So, obviously, rooting around for a party, the libertarians were not going to be open to democratic socialism. I was pretty sure of that. And after reading the platform and spending some good time with it, I found that it became apparent to me that the Green Party and the DSA are aligned in many, many areas. Maybe not perfect alignment, but and as Dave's already alluded to, the Green Party platform is not explicitly socialist, but it's certainly anti-capitalist, and that's a big chunk of it, of what it means to identify as a socialist. So when I started reading these 10 key values, and I'll just read them off for you: grassroots democracy, social justice, and equal opportunity, ecological wisdom, nonviolence, decentralization, which Dave mentioned, community-based economics, big, feminism and gender equality, equity, respect for diversity, personal and global responsibility, and a future focus on sustainability. These are democratic socialist values, every single one of them. The emphasis on democracy from the bottom up is spot on. Social justice and economic equality is also in alignment. Anti-imperialism and peace. Right down the list, really plank after plank, lined up with what I was hearing in the DSA. So, after looking at all that, I took the dive back in May and became a member of the Green Party. I'm a dual member of Green Party and DSA, and some have remarked that makes me a watermelon. I'm green on the outside and red on the inside. But as the other speakers have alluded, I think there are many more of us watermelons walking around. And so for me, the question becomes, what's stopping a red-green alliance from becoming a reality? Because I do believe there are a lot of watermelons walking around. And so my bottom line is this. I firmly believe trying to work within the Democratic Party is a non-starter for me. And so I'm committing to exploring every opportunity to form a red-green alliance between my comrades in the DSA and you all in the Green Party. Right now, the DSA boasts about 50,000 members and is growing. And the Green Party, I didn't remember the figures you said, just in registrations around 200,000 or so. Yeah, so almost 300,000. That's a pretty good alliance right there, 400,000 people, right? So imagine, if you will, the power of groups like DSA aligning with the Green Party, endorsing its candidates, canvassing for them, building a party already on the ballot, running candidates and winning elections in towns, in cities, in state houses, and nationally. That's what I imagine, and that's what I believe that can happen. So that's sort of my spiel today. I'm a dual member. We just recently, the DSA, formed an elections committee, and I wiggled in, I'm not on the committee, but I wiggled in real quick to the two leaders and started asking them, would you be open to Green Party, candidates? And they both said yes. So there's already an opening for us in that regard. So yeah, I think the time has come for a Red-Green Alliance to fight for the better world that we all know could be. And so with that, I will end my speech.
The floor is now open for questions, comments, thoughts.
Hi, I'm Barbara again. I guess this question is mostly for Keith Mann. So, I know a lot of people who are in DSA or who are in these peripheral parties that don't have a lot of candidates or maybe have endorsed some. And it sounds really condescending for me to go up to them and say, your party's not as real as my party is, because you guys don't have enough together as we do. How would you say that Greens should talk with socialists and with other similar leftist groups about helping endorse our candidates over Democratic candidates?
Well, I think this is like a great division of labor here, because DSA is not ready to run candidates, but it's interested in endorsing candidates, and the Greens have all this experience. I think we're trying to figure out what the DSA is. I think we could call it a political organization, but not a political party. And I'm not sure it knows what it wants to do yet. And it also has different federations, different working groups, different emphasis, but there's definitely an interest in electoralism, as you've seen by the working group that's established. I'm going to answer the question in part by saying a few words about what happened this summer when I tried to bring in, when I tried to garner support or encourage Milwaukee DSA to support the Green candidates, particularly the Governor Michael White and Tiffany for Lieutenant Governor. What happened was, I got a little bit of a hearing. There's not always a great forum for discussion at DSA. There's not enough political discussion. But basically, we were, to talk about independent political action in the abstract is one thing, but to have a real alternative is another. So that was really nice in Milwaukee to have two candidates on the ballot, several candidates on the ballot, but three first for state office, right? And here's what happened. There was a lot of support. There was curiosity and interest. Part of the problem, though, was a question of resources. It was hard to make a great case to support the Green Party candidates when the campaign was so little invisible. There wasn't a handle, I've been able to bring campaign material to a DSA meeting and distribute it, had there been organized Green Party candidate campaigning events. We could have absolutely plugged in DSAers, and I think there would have been a lot of interest. But it was hard to make the case for the support when there wasn't enough of the campaign to the last 28, 29 days when the yard signs became available. Now this, of course, is the result of the limited resources of a campaign independent of the boss's party that doesn't have much of a budget, so there's an inevitability there. So there might be a little chicken and egg thing going on here. The stronger we are, the more appealing Greens, I'm wearing a green hat when I say this, makes us more appealing to DSA. But of course, to become more appealing, we need a little bit more substance and a little bit more presence, and that's a question of resources. So I don't think you'll find a lot of it, that DSA will think the Greens is condescending. I think they'll be welcoming fellow leftists, fellow fighters for social justice who have some experience in this area. Because DSA is full of new people. Every meeting there's new people that come in, and hopefully it's not going to be a revolving door that they're going to come in and stay. So I hope that helps.
Everything you just said is right on target. So, speaking as the candidate who didn't have enough time to dedicate to the campaign, carrying on 2 jobs outside of the campaigning, we see in the Green Party, and I think other organizations see the same thing, that everybody gets enthused for a limited period of time, and it's around the election. And what I hope comes out of this is the beginnings of consistent cooperation building for the next series of elections. Because all of the values that we stand for aren't worth dip if we don't put people into elected offices in positions that those values can get empowered, enacted, and eventually enforced. That same discussion is going on at the National Committee right now, with the number of people running for the steering committee, et cetera. We need to get serious. We need to become a party all the time, not just every few months. So your criticism is absolutely on target. Now the question is how we fix it.
Yeah, I'm going to make a shocking statement here. I'm not a leftist, nor am I on the right. A guy named Alfred North Whitehead, back about 100 years ago, philosopher, mathematician, matter of fact, he's given credit for being one of the people that led the way for computers. He had a thing called misplaced concreteness, and that's something that's pretty heavy philosophical. Well, basically what is to understand things in the world, people create categories. Okay? And the whole left-right spectrum is just that, it's a category. It doesn't really exist. But we use it ourselves, divide and conquer ourselves, and give the powers that be a tool to divide us. From many people who are attracted to what Greens have to say, who are conservatives, from the standpoint of they want to actually conserve something. There are a lot of people, we just call them rightists, but you know, we should be, I'm not left or right, I'm a Green. But being a Green is something totally new in a way that really couldn't have existed before the 1970s until studying ecology really took off at the age of computers. Computers for ecology were like what microscopes were for biology. We were finally able to deal with multiple variables and look at whole systems. So the Green Party, one of our key values is, one of our pillars, and I think the foundation, is ecological wisdom. Now this is not environmentalism. Ecological wisdom is a systematic way of looking at the world. And we didn't invent it. As a matter of fact, it's very old. Most first world, first nation peoples have that kind of view of the world. So it's the main thing that Greens bring to politics that's really new. It's an understanding of systems. And I think a lot of people, a lot of Greens, understand that the basic problem we're dealing with is the industrial system, which wouldn't exist without the exploitation of fossil fuels, and will cease to exist once we run out of fossil fuels. So to me, it's not the matter of who owns the means of production. It's the means of production itself which is coming to an end. And that's what Greens have to focus on. What comes next? After all of our gadgets, all our machines, and everything else can no longer be supported by the amount of energy we have available. And solar power won't do it. You've got to do the math and look at it. That's not going to happen. Nor wind, none of those. We're going to have to learn to live with less energy eventually. And that requires us to think differently about the future. Not just to assume that just spreading ownership amongst a lot of people is going to make a difference. It's not going to do it. So I like to see us think in terms of ecological wisdom, first and foremost. To me, it's the foundation that the other three pillars stand on.
Okay. John?
I will have a question. I'm starting to doubt the solar panel thing, because it's in its infancy, the technology. So we may fully well be able to eventually supply enough electricity, but that's a whole other story. Sure, yeah. But it's still young. It's still young. Very young. But I want to say I hope it was the DSA. I hope they don't become a political party. I don't want them to. I'd rather they support the Green Party. Because we don't need more political parties. I mean, just the three, technically four. I wonder why there's four of the third parties. It's like, we're dividing things among ourselves already. It's like, we should really start to, we're not a religious organization here. We're not, and we can work together. We have similarities. We don't need to be 100% agree. So, are there any really very appealing ideas off the top of your head of how to make, maybe not pure socialism, but some aspects of socialism appealing to others who are extremely capitalist and think socialism is what it is? So, if you have any ideas for that.
Dave, you would have something?
Thanks, yeah, so I think, one thing that we're running up against, and which I mentioned, is the limitations of language, right? And even terms like left and progressive, like, what the hell do they mean anymore? You know, Hillary Clinton is running around saying, I'm progressive, and so now it's kind of becoming like liberal, like, now people are like, well, maybe I'm not progressive anymore then, you know, if that's what a progressive is. So, and we always run into this. One example that I thought of was hearing about Murray Bookchin and hearing about him described as a libertarian anarchist, but also as the founder of eco-socialism. So, so yeah, you know, these are kind of words that try to take incredibly complex systems and ways of thought and sort of bottle it all up. So one thing that actually I feel is a strength of the Green Party is that the Greens are defined by our actions. So, like Howie Hawkins said, we can speak for ourselves. So it's not defined by what the Soviet Union did, or you know, by what the Democrats do, or the Republicans. We don't necessarily, you know, there are people who may feel uncomfortable, or the word socialism to them might, you know, cause them to stop listening. But when we talk about the policies like Medicare for all, like a Green New Deal, then that's what hooks them in. So I think socialist groups, we very much find people who are aligned with our core values, and so to me, sort of the top places where we need to go to are socialist groups and schools. You know, talk to young people, but yeah, I get the sort of limitations of language. So I don't know what you mean by someone who's very, very capitalist and how to appeal to them. Because again, what does that mean? Sometimes people think they're capitalist, but they don't like what Wall Street is doing, etc. So yeah, I think, you know, to me, it's getting down to talking about the issues, and you know, we're seeing that the issues that we've led on for years are catching fire and becoming tremendously popular. And now that ranked choice voting is starting to go mainstream. And so I think when we're talking with our socialist comrades, we should talk more about ranked choice voting and about proportional representation. Because again, it's about, if people understand the systems, then they should understand how the political system can empower or disempower people from either having true democracy and being able to get the representation and make the changes that they really want, or how a political system can basically be rigged to you know, keep the power structures the same that they are, and to be forever concentrating wealth and power. So, sorry to go on and on, but I just wanted to respond to a few points and I'll pass it on.
Okay, here we go.
My name's Emily, and I snuck in. I heard Jill Stein was gonna be here. I used to come to the Green Party workshops and organizations until I voted for Jill Stein, and then got really depressed after Donald Trump became president. And then I kind of decided that I'm an anarchist, and was trying to convince, hey guys, vote this year. Like, jokes on them, ha ha ha. And I've actually been thinking that way for the last little while and just been reconsidering things lately. And I want to ask each of you this question. Keith, you said, I don't know if you were talking about a specific scenario or if it was an idea, but as a Democrat
who is also a member of the DSA. You like his platform, you like his background, you like all his values. Should you vote for him or not? If he's elected, if he does make it, or she does make it, you know, past all the doors and hoops and is elected, he will be, you said distracted, suppressed, co-opted, powerless, voiceless. Why, how do you see a Green candidate making it through those doors and not being distracted, suppressed, co-opted, put a gun to their back, blackmailed, you name it? That's why I stopped coming around and I got to see some really pretty faces here today. But that's what I've been struggling with lately and kind of been, you know, if the Green Party and the Socialist Party and the anti-racist and feminist parties all got together and made their own party or organized in their own way and lived their life, our life, without the government organically, I see that more of an actual option than trying to work within the system that is 100% ruled by an oligarchy, which is a corporate monster. So where would the corporate monster go once a Green candidate or a watermelon candidate is elected?
Let's see, Keith, directed to you, or?
But everyone.
Yeah, start with Keith.
I think the way I'd approach that is, it's obvious to me that you can't work inside. And so we have to have independent political party. There are a few independents like Bernie Sanders, but of course he caucuses with the Democrats. But I guess from my point of view, as a Democratic Socialist and as a Green Party member, I want to see an independent third party become, if you will, a second party, to overtake the other two parties, become the party of choice that is not beholden to that Leviathan that you mentioned, to the oligarchy, that is independent, is not taking the pack, is not beholden to anybody. So that would be my goal. I mean, we're not even very close to it. We're not even very close to it, but that would be the goal, to have an independent third party that can say no to that oligarchy. So that's where I'm heading with it, but others may have other views on it.
Well, I like this question. I think there's an answer in the question. Embedded in, I think you're suggesting that elections don't change things. Is that what I'm kind of hearing that? So, well, I think there's a lot of wisdom to this. So why we participate, why we call them, why have I called on organizations, and we're all part of calling for participation, putting all this energy into it. There is socialist electoral strategy and there's socialist electoral strategy. And the one that I associate with is the one that says you can't change things really fundamentally through these elections. Why do we participate? Because it's a platform. Because every time an election comes along, there's heightened interest in politics. And that's why we use it as a platform to get our ideas. If we're responsible, we'll also advocate a program and in the same breath explain that if we win this election, we will not be able to carry it out. We would be able to use office to mobilize the masses of working people and their allies to do so. That's what we can do. So it's a big, big illusion to think that we participate in elections thinking we can somehow capture the state that way, bring about socialism or the end to destructive industrial capitalism. So that's how I would actually answer that. Also in relationship to John, I wanted to say something about that, and that is I think it'd be great if I'm a supporter of the Green Party. I think we should want the Democratic Socialists of America to move towards becoming a political party that runs candidates. It wouldn't be competition. I think these would be very compatible things. I personally think of the Green Party as a canal, a stream, sometimes a big river flowing towards a big ocean of independent political action. And there are other parallel streams, rivers, and brooks like the DSA and the small socialist organizations that we're part of. What could very well happen in this country at some point is that a section of the most potentially powerful social movement in this country, and that's the labor movement, the battered labor movement, which still has 15 million members. Had the labor movement decided to throw its weight behind independent political action, to become part of the Green Party, to become part of the DSA, to call for a larger new organization in which the Greens and the DSA could be welcome, that would really be a game changer. But on the road to that, the proliferation of different organizations that are advocating independent political action is something we should all support. And I want to say one last thing about the anti-capitalism thing before I give this over to Dave. And that is, and so should the Greens be socialist? It's something I thought about. I wasn't necessarily thinking it would come up today, but since it has, I'd like to put this forward. I'm a committed socialist, a committed Green. I don't particularly think the Green Party should commit itself necessarily to socialism because of what we said, of what the brother over here said. And something tells me that you're not alone. There's a lot of people in the Green Party that wouldn't be comfortable with it as a socialist party. Why lose them? The basis of our lives, the reason why we socialists love the Greens so much is because you're implicit and often explicit anti-capitalism. What happens next? After we get rid of capitalism, we think it's going to be some form of socialism, or we can call it different things. And that leads me to one quick other point I want to make in relationship to Dave's intervention. I very much appreciate, I think we all did, that you read part of the program about in response to the socialism and anti-capitalism. But you outlined only two, the document, it wasn't you, said there's capitalism and state socialism or something like that. Well, for us revolutionary socialists, there's a third option, and that's socialism that's democratic. Socialism that involves a planned economy, a responsible marshaling of our resources, but that's taken into account, that's run from below. Democracy is independent of capitalism. Socialism can't exist without it. So I think that when we think of socialism as a negative word, we're thinking back in the 20th century. Socialism is a good word. I think it was it Barbara that said it's no longer the last discussion, it's no longer a conversation ender, it's a conversation beginning. My students are very open to socialism. They haven't had decades and decades of propaganda, Cold War propaganda and socialism. So it's a new world.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and just the whole discussion, I feel like a million light bulbs are going off in my head, so I'll try to bring together some of these strands. So first of all, I also want to highly recommend a thinker named Gar Alperovitz, who wrote a book called America Beyond Capitalism, which really has a lot of incredible ideas for basically how we can democratize wealth. And the amazing thing is that they're big ideas, but they don't even feel particularly radical, just kind of like an evolution. In fact, a lot of them are about evolving to a new way of doing things. So there's no way I can sum up the book, but America Beyond Capitalism by Gar Alperovitz. So, yeah, as I mentioned, I've been dabbling in anarchist thought, reading some Murray Bookchin, but one thing that I think is inescapable is that even if we go off the grid, the gears of the machine are going to continue to grind. And we know at this point that it's our survival at stake. So unfortunately, we don't really have the luxury of being able to opt out. We have to change the system if we want to survive. And not only us, if we want most forms of life on Earth to survive. We only have one planet, and it's a pretty amazing planet. And as you said, it's depressing and outrageous to see it being destroyed. So I think that requires engaging with systems of power. And as Keith said, as all of us know, politics and power and economics is endlessly complex, and there's all sorts of apparent contradictions. And we rail against the two-party system, and we rail against the Democrats and Republicans, even as we say, but I agree with that thing that they did, and that thing that they said, and that thing was good. And so we are, just pushing on the wall until we find the cracks, and then we all run for the cracks and bust through. But I believe that change usually happens slow, but sometimes it can happen fast. And it's hard to know when exactly that's going to be. But I wanted to speak specifically about independent politics because I feel like sometimes, again, it sounds like we're talking about ideology and, sort of our ego is caught up in being on the hardcore left or being a green and just not going to be reasonable and support the two-party system like reasonable people should. But so let's talk about what Bernie Sanders, there's an amazing clip of him talking to a DSA meeting, I think in 1989 or 1990, where he talks about the need for an independent progressive party outside of the two-party system, independent from the Democratic Party, the need for a rainbow coalition, with black and brown people, with low-income people, working-class people. And he's saying all the things that we're saying today. That was then, and now we see he has gotten a taste of power inside the Democratic Party, and people can argue, not without merit, that he is accomplishing something and that he is, winning people over to the idea of democratic socialism. But I also want to bring up some of the trade-offs of that lack of independence. For example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gets elected, she's talking about a Green New Deal, and we're very happy that people are now talking about a Green New Deal, but she's also supporting Nancy Pelosi and saying, oh, Nancy Pelosi is a great leader, and that's the cost to play the Democratic Party's game. You have, if she didn't do that, then the Democratic Party wouldn't keep her around very long, as we saw with people like Nancy Kucinich or Cynthia McKinney. If you actually show some independence, they'll show you the door very quickly. And Bernie Sanders, we saw California where they have the top two primaries. So we had two races in Los Angeles where we had young, progressive, green community organizers in one-on-one races versus sort of graying corporate establishment Democrats who were taking a lot of corporate money and towing the line. Bigger military budgets, bigger state power, etc. In some of the poorest, most disempowered districts there are. And that 1990 Bernie Sanders would have come in and said, I support these guys, they're saying all the things that we need. And instead, the 2018 Bernie Sanders went in and endorsed their opponents. So he's actually using his power to weigh in against independent politics at this point. And that's the choice that he's made. He's playing the Democrats' game, but I think that really illustrates how the inside-outside strategy, again, it leads to the inside, and then you start working against independent politics. And the last thing I'll say about this for now is if we start talking more with these groups about proportional representation, then there would be, or even ranked choice voting. In a ranked choice voting election, I have no problem if the DSA wants to run a candidate and the Greens want to run a candidate. That helps both of those candidates probably. If we have proportional representation, we can work together in a coalition. But it's the structure of the first past the post electoral system, which is hundreds of years old, and the stupidest, just scientifically and mathematically speaking, it's the most basic and simple voting system, and it's not a good one. And most countries around the world have figured this out, but it's also very easy to manipulate by a ruling elite. But yeah, I think, again, we need to talk with everyone about ranked choice voting, proportional representation, and plant that seed. And then I think also people will start to understand the long-term project that we're getting at, which is, yeah, we want to take power eventually, but we also want to abolish power.
Going back to one of the focuses of her question, why get engaged? My simple answer is that my kid's life is in jeopardy. From studies that have been done, 70% or more of insect life in diverse ecologies has disappeared in the last 30 years. There are studies that just came out where killer whales and other apex predators in the oceans are failing to reproduce. Insect life is dying. The food web that supports everything up to, including our agriculture, is failing. Oceans are starting to die. Chemicals that I studied in graduate school 30 years ago are diffuse around the world, and I could drown you in papers. We are flipping running out of time. That's why you engaged. Now, we can have long discussions about socialism, ism, thisism, thatism, and I don't disagree, with most of what Dave says. But when I try to convince my neighbors and everybody else that we need to bring in to solve these problems in the short term, for me, that's not a winning conversation. I'm not very good at it, and I don't have any patience with it. The key thing that we need to do is build whatever coalitions with whatever we can to prevent things from falling apart. My take home from the election was working with the libertarians, working with the independent candidate Maggie Turnbull, working with the disaffected Mike McCabe voters that showed up, working with the disaffected Republicans that showed up to come hear what we have to say. Because we have some key value messages, and if we focus on those, we can bring people together and accomplish all the other things that you want to do. But if we start by focusing on socialism and green and this and that, we're going to eventually win that discussion, but the other problems are not going to get solved. So for me, it comes back to we are in a crisis mode, and the cynic in me tells you that you are going to see fascism in this country like you have never seen before in the immediate future, because he's right. The means of production are disappearing, and the people that have it are not voluntarily going to give it up because they're nice people, and the people that have it have the guns and the power and the money. And the reason we have a military is we want to hold on to the sources of energy and other things that we need to sustain their standard of living. And that's not gonna change with simple grassroots changes. It's gonna be much more difficult than that. Change is gonna be rapid, and I hope we can avoid it without it being violent. But the clock is ticking, and we are flipping, running out of time.
A couple more, and I see the super's on. Yeah.
So Michael is quite right. I just listened to the last talk of a political scientist, sociology professor, who has written several books on political action in and around the rest of the world. Not so much in America, because there's a real exciting happening here, according to her. But at any rate, she said that the largest growing population of voters in the rest of the world are either green or brown. We don't need a brown party in the United States. We have a really good brown party in the grand old party. The Republicans are our fascists. And our Democrats are not turning into green. They are not going to support the people or to support the planet. They too are a corporatist party. So I would say that the Democrats are fascists as well. We've only got one Green Party. That's our Green Party. And we are so lucky that it is a worldwide party, because we can get the support from the rest of the world in order to do the things that we have to do here in America, because America is killing us. It just is. We've known for 50 years what we need to do. We have been operating, we've got our platform, we've been able to talk about these things, and yes, they do get slightly incorporated into the rhetoric of the Democratic Party, but they don't actually do anything about it. And in my homeland, we have a Green president. He is a Green president with the Green and Labor movement. That's the coalition there. We've got red, green all over the world. We need red, green, green.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. It's no mystery as to why we're having this discussion. Clearly, the Green Party and the Socialist Party do agree on many things, treatment of people, workers, and human rights and whatnot. But there is also a huge contrast between the Green Party and the Socialist Party, because the fatal flaw of the Socialist Party, no offense, but they point to the end goal. They want to completely overhaul the system. Or at least that's the concept. And then when the average person points out, well, we can't get from here to there, then the Socialist Party says, well, okay, we're going to move to this step right here. And then the general public sees that as a huge compromise and says, well, if you're not true to your ideals, why should I buy into it? It's like standing at the bottom of the stairs and saying we have to go from here, pointing at the top stairs, we have to go from here to there. But, obviously that's not going to happen, so we'll just move to this step here. Whereas the Green Party takes a completely different approach, and they focus on things from where we're at now, and says, okay, we got to move to this step, we have to move to this step. We want to get to up there, but we're moving there from here, and we're looking at incremental changes based on making individual choices. The Green Party doesn't just focus on getting a person in office. We focus on personal choices that people make. We promote education of individual choices and the role that plays in our the larger scene. The means of production are certainly an issue. None of us would be here if it wasn't. But it's only going to be addressed through addressing consumerism. We need to, the capitalism is fed by the people who are buying stuff. If we don't address this mass consumption, no other argument that we have is going to matter. Right. Exactly, it's not about whether we give permission to cut down the trees to these people or to those people. We don't want the trees to get cut down in the first place. So, I don't know how you would reconcile that, because there's way more on the table than just the means of production.
You mentioned people holding guns to the back of the politicians' heads once they're there. It's already happening. I mean, not necessarily to everyone sitting here, but politics in general. Any Republican or Democrat that makes it there, they have the gun to the back of their head already. That's why we have the reptilian and the Illuminati conspiracies. And the point is, the people with the gun are never going to disappear. They're always going to be there. And if we don't stand up to them, then our children and our grandchildren are going to be punished even more than we have been by our own grandparents. And none of it has been intentional. We're uneducated, we're still uneducated. We have to get it out there. We have to show up to the polls. We have to put our vote in. We have to acknowledge how important the knowledge is, not only to us, but to everybody else around us. I've been there to the point where you don't want to vote anymore. Because why? We got 2 parties. No, we don't. And other places have 10 political parties currently serving in their offices right now. I talked to a man from South Africa a month ago, and I talked to him for a half hour, and he couldn't believe that I was saying the things that I was saying when we have the current runners in office. He was like, he kept talking about how can you have such a clear mind about the situation, and yet all the people who are voting have voted in these terrible choices, who are corporately run, who are going to take us deeper. Basically, it's like it's been said all day. We are the people we've been waiting for, and if we don't get up and make that step, we're all screwed. We are reaching 10 million really, really fast. And there's places like Burlington, Vermont, who have switched over to almost 100% renewable resources between solar, wind, biomass. Their CO2 has dropped like crazy. And we can all follow their example. If we decide to step up, we can't keep sitting here. We gotta get the F up and do something.
Any parting words, or should we eat? Eat.
I can go on for another I think we can do this all day.
Oh, here we go.
Because some of you may be leaving and not staying for dinner, and I just wanted to say thank you to Bruce Hankworth for the delicious And also I want to thank the state membership committee members and the Greater Milwaukee Green Party members for the work they did to organize this event. Thank you.
I do have one extra comment.
With reference to what you just said, we got 11,000 votes, and we did almost no campaigning. We don't have 11,000 Green Party people in Wisconsin. The message, the limited amount that we did, that got out there, was enough to attract people. I also got hate mail, and Maggie Turner got threats. But if we get the message out there, we will make things happen.
How about if we do the raffle before people start leaving? We do the raffle while people are eating?
Okay, do the raffle. There's a request to do the raffle.
You're gonna need this for the raffle, Robert?
If it's a check nation vote, let's see if anybody renews on there. Because I think Dave said we're going to need people that renew today. So I don't know. know if you're able to see.
Oh, the mic? Right when I say you don't need it.
Sure. Announcement, we have one last chance if you want to renew your membership, or if you're a sustaining member, you can also put paper into the raffle. You can win a shirt tonight. So we'll give you a couple, or become a new member. That's an option too. And if you do that, you can win a shirt, and we'll give you a couple minutes to get those in, and we'll draw for the raffle.
any GUI, you're a GUI guy, right? I mean, you kind of intuitive. John he's so intuitive. All right, so we're still live. Oh, I'm looking kind of for, maybe click there, I don't know. And then the other thing is, oh, down here. I just want to stop it. Oh, that's the Android killer stop everything, right?
Yes.
That's really kind of brutal way.
Don't do, yes.
Yeah. I don't want to share. It's like, come on. I want to believe it's that. But it's, and then I think, well, just click anywhere now.
Yeah.
What's, I can't really see what that's. All right, now I'm going to ask John. John, I think I'm still streaming, and I don't know how to stop it. You know?
Yeah, it says live.
Okay.
Was it
The land right in front of it.
Well, yeah, we don't. Oh, okay, they don't know. They had a